statistical, mathematical fact
never has been down.
has broken every single record. There is no asset that has come close.
It's the only thing in the industry that was not touched, that was not hacked, and it never fails doing what it promised in 2009. It's never
What's
failed.
the best performing asset the world has ever seen? And you'll find out that it's
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome, Bitcoiners, welcome, traders, welcome, followers, welcome, haters. Welcome to another live Spaces with Oliver Velez. Of course, my name is Oliver Velez, and I'm your Bitcoiner for life. At least I hope to be. And I'm also your 13%er Bitcoiner. Now, I'm also very much in the habit of letting you know up front at the top of my talks what 13%er means, simply because I constantly get this as probably the most frequently asked question. Oliver, what does a 13%er mean? Well, very briefly, I don't need to go into this in great detail, as I have done so in almost every single talk over the past month or so. What a 13%er Bitcoiner means is that I am a Bitcoin only proponent. I only support Bitcoin, and I believe that Bitcoin is a one-off. It is a one-time discovery. There cannot be another alternative. There cannot be another option. There cannot be another money. There cannot be another cryptocurrency that has any value whatsoever as it relates to what Bitcoin has come into our lives and our existences to be and do and accomplish. And so it is said that out of all the individuals and organizations that have adopted Bitcoin in one form or another, out of all of those, only 13% of those are Bitcoin only. And so I'm here to tell you that I am one of those 13%ers. And I believe that the 13%ers are the elite of the elite, because only 0.5% up until this point, only 0.5% of all human beings on earth have adopted Bitcoin. The group that has adopted Bitcoin is rare in and of itself, but the 13%ers are the rare of the rare, and I am one of those. I hope if you are not, at some point in the future, you will become too. And if you stay close, I'm going to try my darndest to make you understand this view and become a 13%er yourself. Anyway, I want to thank you all for attending this talk, whether you are listening to it live, whether you are listening to it in a recorded fashion. I appreciate every single one of you. I appreciate the fact that you give me something that you can never get back, which is your time. And I made a promise over 3 decades ago that anytime I'm offered the opportunity to speak on freedom, to speak on independence, financial freedom in particular, anytime I'm afforded the opportunity to speak in front of an audience, to speak on a stage, at a podium, in front of a mic, or in a live spaces like this, I will do my very best to give something of value, something that I believe that you'll be able to honor and to be able to respect and potentially use for the rest of your lives. I hope I'm able to do this today in this brief talk. I hope to keep it as brief as possible, but I hope to be able to accomplish that today. And if I'm not able to do that, I promise I'll get better and better each time I try. All right, so today's talk was actually prompted by a comment that I got just a little while ago. And this actually is living proof that your comments are very valuable, at least to me they are, simply because they give me insight into what's on your mind and what topics that I believe we need to actually touch upon as Bitcoiners, as burgeoning Bitcoiners, as Bitcoiners who want to deepen our understanding of what Bitcoin is as an asset, what role it plays in our lives and in the future lives of almost every single person on earth. And so your comments are very important. They also help me know how much I don't know at times. And your comments give me the motivation to do deep dives for myself, for my own personal development, especially when your comments touch upon something that I'm not very familiar with. And so you serve a very valuable purpose to me. You play a very, very important role in my development as a Bitcoiner as well, because some of you do raise issues that I am simply not familiar with. And they send me off into a variety of different directions to become more knowledgeable in those specific areas. This comment I received recently touched upon the topic of non-KYC Bitcoin. And this is something that I've dealt with. It is something that I've spoken about and guided some of what I would call my Bitcoiners on for quite some time. And for the benefit of those who may not know what the acronym KYC means, let me just talk very briefly about what that is. KYC stands for Know Your Customer rules or policy. And not to delve too much on the historical precedent that set KYC or Know Your Customer rules in place, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this became a thing after the terrorist attack on the Twin Towers in the United States all the way back in 2001. This horrific event was used by politicians and governmental bodies to basically encourage individuals to sacrifice a big portion of their personal privacy, in particular their financial privacy, by giving up all information that is connected to their financial goings on. And so from that particular point onward, there was this urge on the part of financial, and there was this legal demand on the part of all financial organizations to basically know who they're dealing with, to know all the details regarding their identity. And today, we have financial organizations that simply will not do business with you or allow you to do business with them until you or unless you offer up all kinds of information: your name, your address, your phone number, your email address, a photo of your face, a copy of your governmental ID, including passports and driver's licenses and things of that nature. Now, this in one way can be understood. In another way, it can be looked at as a violation of personal privacy rights. And I believe that every single individual is born with the right to privacy, and especially the privacy of all of their financial moves. No one should really have to know the inner details of every financial transaction we make. I think it is an overstep, and perhaps sometime in the future, or at some point in the future, it will get reversed or changed. But today, we live in a KYC dominated world. And when Bitcoin came into existence as a money, or a burgeoning money that does not require any information whatsoever other than your receive address, does not require your name or anything that personally identifies you to a financial transaction, there are some hardcore Bitcoiners who have come up and grown up with this asset over the last 15 years that believes that Bitcoin is not truly Bitcoin unless it is non-KYC oriented, which means that it does not have a personal identity tied to the Bitcoin. Now, because Bitcoin is an open source protocol, whenever an identity is attached to a specific Bitcoin transaction, that specific Bitcoin can be tracked and traced for life, forever, for the most part. And this does raise some privacy concerns. That once you associate your identity to Bitcoin, as an example, once you buy Bitcoin on Coinbase, which has you KYC'd, which basically knows that you bought that Bitcoin, even if you were to remove the Bitcoin from Coinbase's custody into your own personal custody, the tracking of that Bitcoin throughout its future history, its future activity, can be associated with you. So wherever you send it, the address you send it to, it is assumed that the address that you've sent it to is yours, and it can be tracked from there, from address to address, transaction to transaction. Now, I don't want to go too deeply into the tracking of Bitcoin. What I really want to talk about is whether or not the view that true Bitcoin is non-KYC Bitcoin and the not so true Bitcoin is any Bitcoin that is KYC'd or has your identity associated with it. I don't, at this particular point where we are, I don't believe that we should be choosing sides with whether or not non-KYC Bitcoin that is acquired through a source or a medium or in a way that does not have your identity tracked and associated with the transaction. I don't believe that we should be choosing whether one is the only exclusive way we should acquire Bitcoin. I believe that, especially as Americans, and I believe that I'm largely speaking to Americans here, I believe that it's important to acquire 2 stashes of Bitcoin. I believe that it is necessary to acquire KYC Bitcoin. And as long as it remains legal for us to acquire non-KYC Bitcoin, I believe that it's important to build a stash of Bitcoin that is non-KYC as well. And if I were guiding you, I would tell you that the non-KYC Bitcoin, the Bitcoin that you acquire through a friend, or the Bitcoin that you acquire through a decentralized exchange, or the Bitcoin that you acquire through means that does not require you to associate your identity with it, that be your really, truly long-term generational Bitcoin. And that the KYC oriented Bitcoin that you accumulate will largely be the Bitcoin that you might use for things in the future. And so I think that it's worthy to split our Bitcoin into these 2 parts, where there is the deep storage Bitcoin that is the non-KYC Bitcoin. This should be looked at as the Bitcoin that you might pass on to your family. This might be the Bitcoin that you regard as truly untouchable, that will never be used, or almost never be used except in extreme emergencies. And that the KYC Bitcoin is potentially what you'll use in the existing financial arena, as long as that exists. Now, let me add some flesh behind these two groups of Bitcoin, these two types of Bitcoin, KYC Bitcoin and non-KYC Bitcoin. I don't believe that uh, we, I don't believe that in the near future, this is going to change. I am an optimist at heart, and I do believe that potentially at some point in the future, um, there won't be a need to associate your identity with Bitcoin transactions. But I do think that while I do believe that potentially can happen in the future, I think that point for us is far off. So one might ask, Oliver, why do you believe there's a need to have KYC Bitcoin? Because I believe that most people still want to use Bitcoin for something, that most people are looking at their investment in Bitcoin as a means to a better life, maybe a better home, um, and things of that nature. And if that is the case, you are going to need KYC Bitcoin in order to use that Bitcoin for that better life or for that better home that happens to be your dream, right? I don't believe that banks are getting into Bitcoin just to hold Bitcoin. Now, the E, the EU just recently, I think over the last few days, they passed a law that gives banks in the EU and the European Union the ability to hold up to 2% of their reserves in Bitcoin. I believe that the banks are rushing in to the Bitcoin space, not just because of number go up. I believe that they're starting to recognize that that Bitcoin is becoming the most pristine collateral on earth today. And I believe that they're seeing the writing on the wall and they're preparing for a future at which they will provide services on top of Bitcoin. But it won't be Bitcoin that you can't identify as Bitcoin. You can't identify the form or the manner in which you acquired the Bitcoin. So I believe that Bitcoin will be used as collateral in the future. It will become the most pristine collateral for businesses and individuals in the future. And I believe that anyone who has decent amounts of this KYC Bitcoin in the future will basically get the red carpet rolled out in front of them. I believe that things right now, as we speak, are being set up in a fashion, in a way that will allow you to custody your Bitcoin without ever having to sell your Bitcoin. And the bank or the financial organizations basically just give you what you want. If you want a home and you have um, enough um, enough Bitcoin to post as collateral for that home, you'll get the home. If you want a brand new car, if you have enough Bitcoin to post as collateral, you'll get the car. You want to trip around the world, post your Bitcoin as collateral. You want a loan for fiat currency, post the Bitcoin as collateral. I believe that Bitcoin will start to become the base layer of collateral. It will become the most pristine collateral in the world, largely because it trades 24 hours a day. It's never down. It's the most secure network on the planet. It's highly liquid and becoming more and more liquid. It's global. And there is no other asset that falls into those categories that has those characteristics. And so there's no third party risk as well. So it largely removes much of the risk with all other forms of collateral. In the past, if you posted a piece of property as collateral to do another property or to do something else, if you posted a piece of property, a piece of land, something could actually happen to the land. Lawsuits could attack the collateral by other entities. There could be some third party risk that claims to have ownership of the collateral that was posted. The actual collateral could be the land could be destroyed. The land could get liens. The piece of property can have liens placed against it. The piece of property or the home you posted as collateral can burn down, can get damaged in some way. None of this exists with the pristine collateral called Bitcoin. And so the financial world, the traditional financial industry as we know it is literally starting to dot the I's and cross the T's and put in the infrastructure to be able to use Bitcoin as a pristine form of collateral to give any Bitcoiner anything they want on planet Earth. I do believe that those in the future who hold Bitcoin in any decent amounts will be able to get anything on planet Earth that their heart desires. I am a big supporter, as most of you who've been following me for even a little bit of time, I'm a big supporter in promoting the idea that you should not be selling it, because the time where you won't have to sell it and still be able to get what you want from it is fast approaching us. The BlackRocks of the world, the Fidelities of the world, the Invescos of the world, the all of the major organizations coming into this space, they're not just coming in to buy and hodl like we are. They're coming in to provide services on top of Bitcoin. So the layers on top of Bitcoin are coming. All right. Money is a layered system. Bitcoin will be no different. There will be loans against your Bitcoin, loans that maybe you never even have to pay back. There will be, so it will become, in my opinion, the pristine collateral, but you won't be able to take advantage of this with non-KYC Bitcoin. That until this changes, all of the TradFi organizations that will be willing to give you anything that your heart desires will require that you prove where you got the Bitcoin from. That's just the way it is. And for this reason, if you have any hope in the future of using Bitcoin in this fashion, not having to sell it, but being able to post it as collateral to get whatever your heart desires, you're going to have a decent amount of KYC Bitcoin. Now, that doesn't mean that I believe that all of your KYC, all of your Bitcoin should be KYC. No, 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 no. I believe that non-KYC Bitcoin is as important as KYC Bitcoin. And so the true Bitcoiner should be developing or accumulating both types of stashes. All right. Where Bitcoin, this Bitcoin that does not have your identity tied to it, is the Bitcoin that you will not be able to use in this regard, but will be the base layer of your, in my opinion, your future growing wealth, and the Bitcoin that at one particular point you pass on to another, you pass on to your loved ones. But it will be, in my opinion, non-KYC is the base layer of the pyramid if we look at this system in a pyramid type format. I spoke recently about my philosophy of splitting the baby. And whenever I'm approached with, do you do this or do you do that? And these two things that I'm approached with as possibilities, as options, are sort of on opposite ends of each other. I have found throughout life that the truth between these two things, the truth largely lies between the two things that you're struggling with, or at least somewhere near the middle of the two things that you're struggling with. And in this case, we're talking about KYC Bitcoin, which stands at one end, and totally non-KYC Bitcoin, which stands at the polar opposite end. And the truth for us is somewhere in the middle. Whether that's a 50-50 split or a 60-40 split, that's something that the personal Bitcoiner has to decide. But I do believe that in most cases, you can't go wrong with this life's philosophy, with this philosophy of life. Split the baby between two opposing views. And in most cases throughout life, you can't go too wrong by doing that. And in this case, I think it's pretty much the same, that a Bitcoiner can't go wrong by building both stashes. Now, I know that this is not going to be a popular point of view or popular talk by me from the really hardcore Bitcoiners, but we can't lose sight of the fact that we still live in the system. I think there's a quote in the Bible that's attributed to Jesus Christ that says, live, um, live in the world, just don't be of the world. All right, be in the world, but don't be of the world. And I think that this splitting the baby approach allows us to be exactly this, to be in the existing world, to not completely divorce ourselves from that, but just not to be of the world. We have something that is otherworldly, which is Bitcoin. Now, so what I want to touch upon next regarding this topic is something that is debatable, but is interesting nonetheless. The way I see it, there is this possibility, all right? And I'm just projecting here, I'm pontificating in a way, but there is this possibility that non-KYC Bitcoin actually fetches in the peer-to-peer market, in the P2P market, fetches a higher premium than KYC Bitcoin. That if these two types of Bitcoin start to coexist for an extended period of time, it is possible that your non-KYC Bitcoin in the peer-to-peer space, if you were to sell it or get rid of it, that it could fetch a higher premium, that there could be a higher price placed on Bitcoin that is, for lack of a better word, clean or pure of an identity. Now, that's pontificating. That's projecting in a way. But what I do know is that this dual type pricing tendency is applied to anything and has been applied to anything in the past that has been marked. So if we look at KYC Bitcoin as being marked Bitcoin, that would seem to have a different value than unmarked Bitcoin. Marked bills have a lower value in the fiat world than unmarked bills do. All right. And anything that's marked in the past has always fetched a lower price than that which is free of a mark. All right. So I'm not saying that this will happen. I'm just saying that based on my experience in the financial world, this has been the case. And so it's possible that your non-KYC Bitcoin could fetch higher prices in the peer-to-peer market. Now, what I mean by peer-to-peer is when you're dealing with just the general populace directly without an intermediary in between, without a Coinbase, without a Kraken, without an exchange, without a financial institution, and you're dealing person to person on a decentralized exchange, or you're dealing person to person and in person, or what have you, it's direct to direct. It's possible that it could fetch higher premiums. Now, what are some of the problems with non-KYC Bitcoin? Because that's one of the potential benefits of having a stash in non-KYC, that it's just more valuable, potentially. And this is not to say that Bitcoin splits itself and now it's not fungible. I don't want to go that far. I think that that's the wrong view. That's the wrong take on what I'm explaining here. I'm explaining market forces and how market forces might give that type of Bitcoin a different valuation than the marked Bitcoin. But that is not to say that one Bitcoin is not one Bitcoin anymore. I don't want to go that far. And so please don't misunderstand me. But so one of the benefits of non-KYC Bitcoin is that it could fetch a higher price in the peer-to-peer market. What's a negative of non-KYC Bitcoin? Well, we spoke about that. You won't be able to use it largely for the foreseeable future in any traditional financial arrangement or transaction. So you won't be able to buy a home or trip around the world or your Lambo if that's what floats your boat, and, through an existing financial organization unless you can prove how you got the Bitcoin. So that's one negative. Another negative for me specifically, and for many others like me, is that non-KYC Bitcoin is just simply not available in the amounts that I want. So it's very difficult to acquire, $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 worth of Bitcoin at a clip, um, in the peer-to-peer market. Is just simply not available. It's not, that market's not that big, and the majority of players in that part of Bitcoin's ecosystem, they're relatively small holders and small owners of Bitcoin. And so you get non-KYC Bitcoin in drips and drabs. Now, that might be fine for the vast majority of people, but people that really want to take advantage potentially of one of Bitcoin's down years, and they want to start really converting trashy fiat currency that they're bringing in with their cash flow into Bitcoin in major chunks, non-KYC Bitcoin at this particular point is just not going to cut it. And so, for me, it is posed that poses a major problem. And for people or traders or players like me that want big chunks of it, non-KYC Bitcoin is a very big problem. I am not into meeting someone in a back alley who claims to have a big amount of Bitcoin and bringing a brown paper bag or a suitcase full of cash to that individual. That's just not what I'm going to do. All right. So that's one of the negatives. If you want big amounts and large accumulation of non-KYC Bitcoin, it's not very easy. All right. And so this is my take. My take is that there should not be a fight between these two types of Bitcoin, that you should marry them together, that they each serve, these two types serve their purposes. I believe that, especially as Americans and anyone who lives in a country with policies similar to America, that it's a good plan to have both stashes as long as accumulating non-KYC Bitcoin is legal in your jurisdiction. Now, I can never promote or encourage that you do something illegal, but that's why I say as long as it remains illegal. And I say that because, is there a possibility that accumulating Bitcoin in any other way other than through a KYC organization, is that possible to be passed for a period of time? Yes, that's very possible. In fact, I'd be surprised if that step is not taken sometime in the future. So I think we should be prepared for that. And as long as we haven't arrived there yet, where accumulating non-KYC Bitcoin isn't illegal, I think that you should have an effort to accumulate what you can on the non-KYC side as well. But make no mistake about it, if you're thinking in the future of using your Bitcoin in ways that get you things that can only be gotten except through the traditional financial arena, you're going to need KYC Bitcoin. Now, this talk of mine was spurred by someone who was making a comment about Strike, which this person felt that Strike went over and beyond the call of duty when requiring all kinds of personal information, all the way down to this person claimed that Strike wants to even wants a picture of your social security card and a photo of yourself and a video and all of these things. And again, I say, that for the portion of your Bitcoin that is KYC, that should not be a problem. All right. Of course, for the portion that you want to fall into the non-KYC camp, then you should. Then, of course, that is a problem. But using Strike for your KYC shouldn't be a problem, like any other organization that requires your ID to be associated with all of your transactions. All right. Now, this brings me to, I think, what might be the final point on this topic is this. If you go down this path of accumulating both stashes, both types, non-KYC and KYC Bitcoin, I do think that it's very important, I know it's very important to really keep this separate. Now, I think the easiest way to keep both types of Bitcoin separate is to really just have a completely different address and to label your non-KYC from your KYC transactions very clearly. So whenever, for instance, let's say, for instance, you go out with some friends, you have dinner, it's 6 of you, and you decide that, look, I will pay the entire bill for everyone. We're Dutch, we're going Dutch. We're all going to take care of our respective bills, but I'll take care of the bill with my credit card. You guys pay me your portion in Bitcoin. Now, that Bitcoin that you receive from each of your other 5 friends for their portion of the bill that you paid with your credit card, that actually can be considered non-KYC Bitcoin. It is not acquired through a financial organization that is in the business of selling you Bitcoin. And it's not through an organization that is required to take all of the pertinent information regarding who you are and things of that nature. That's non-KYC Bitcoin, but it needs to be labeled as such because you can actually taint your non-KYC Bitcoin and make it KYC by mixing non-KYC with KYC Bitcoin in a single transaction. So that whenever you have to spend, for whatever reason you have to spend your Bitcoin, if you take a portion of that spend from a non-KYC address and a KYC address to spend, then you've tainted the KYC address. You've tainted the KYC Bitcoin, and you've actually converted it to KYC Bitcoin. All right. So it's important to keep them separate in and out, and it's important to label these transactions appropriately. And I think the best way is to sort of just keep separate addresses and to keep separate ways that you monitor separate interfaces or separate wallets, if you will. I think that's the easiest way, and it reduces the possibility of you mixing the non-KYC with the KYC. Now, if you want an example of how this potentially can happen, this mistake or error can potentially happen, let's say you need 1.5 Bitcoin for something. And so you have 0.70, one address has 0.75 Bitcoin in it. And that address is not enough to meet your 1.5% demand. You go to other addresses or other UTXOs to make up the full 1.5. So you might need 5 or 6 other UTXOs, unspent transaction outputs, which are nothing more than sort of like the bills in your wallet, right? So in order to get $150 or 1.5 Bitcoin, to use examples, you might have $75 here, but you might have to go somewhere else to make up the other 75. And so if you want to use non-KYC Bitcoin for the 1.5 Bitcoin that you need to post as collateral, let's say, and you take 75 KYC Bitcoin and you grab Bitcoin from non-KYC addresses and you mix them together, you have just now made all of your non-KYC Bitcoin in that transaction tied to your identity. So it's important to label your transactions properly. You label every type of Bitcoin that you're receiving. If you're receiving non-KYC Bitcoin, you need to make sure that's labeled properly as non-KYC Bitcoin. If you're receiving KYC Bitcoin from, let's say, Coinbase or whatever, you need to label that KYC Bitcoin, and you need to keep them far apart from each other and separate. You understand? Now, it's possible to just use one source. You can mix into your wallet, if you will. You can have a bunch of UTXOs in your wallet, some of which are KYC, some of which are non-KYC. If they're labeled properly, you can keep them all in one place, for lack of a better word, but got to be really careful not to mix them in and join. You can't join non-KYC with KYC and expect it to remain the same. It just simply won't. All right. So the TLDR on this, guys, is simply that there should not be this fight between whether or not KYC Bitcoin is better than non-KYC Bitcoin is better than KYC Bitcoin, or which one you should be doing, because there are some Bitcoiners out here saying that you're not a real Bitcoiner if you're accumulating Bitcoin on a centralized exchange. I am not. While I'm a 13%er, I don't go that far. I believe that you need KYC Bitcoin. I believe that we all need both forms of Bitcoin, KYC and non-KYC, and that you should have a plan to accumulate both stashes. That split between those stashes is your personal choice. All right, whether you want an 80-20 split or a 50-50 split or a 60-40 split, that's up to you. But this is my approach, and I felt it was a great topic for me to sort of add some flesh to. So I want to see if there are any questions. Well, I can't see this here, guys. I want to see if there are any questions regarding this. I told you it would be somewhat brief here. And always have a hard time in these talks finding your comments. But let me just see if there are anybody who have any comments. Bitcoin for Earth is saying, Oliver, if it's not illegal to buy non-KYC, why can't you just keep records and provide those records at the time when you want KYC it for use? I just don't believe that. I believe that most financial organizations, especially for any financial transaction that is of size, I think they're going to want to know the source of your funds. And so I just believe I would not be comfortable using non-KYC Bitcoin for any major financial action with a centralized traditional financial firm. I would keep my non-KYC Bitcoin out of that. All right. And I is asking, is it possible to know the full history of a non-KYC Bitcoin, even if transacted peer-to-peer? Well, of course. Bitcoin is an open source protocol. Some people, which means that you can actually trace the history of any Satoshi throughout its entire life if you want to. This is available to every human being on Earth, and it's actually freely available. The overall network is audited on average every 10 minutes. It is updated and verified and audited every 10 minutes. There is nothing on planet Earth that is audited every 10 minutes. In fact, most things are never audited, like the Federal Reserve or the amount the U.S. has, the amount of gold the U.S. really has. It's reported, but is it really ever verified or audited? No. No one knows truly how much gold exists on planet Earth above ground. That can't be audited. No one knows how many US dollars are in existence. No human being knows that today. That can't be truly audited. Bitcoin is the only thing on planet Earth that is verified to the single Satoshi every single 10 minutes. It is fully audited virtually every single 10 minutes. And the entire history of every single Satoshi can be tracked throughout its entire life. Now, this means that the network is not totally private. And some people use this as an attack vector for Bitcoin, or they use it as a way to fault Bitcoin on its privacy procedures. But this is not entirely true, because you don't want the base layer of any money to be 100% private. This is the problem that we have today, that we don't have transparency. Bitcoin has come into the world to solve a trust problem, to solve transparency, to say, here are the books open to the entire world. Every human being can verify exactly how many Satoshis exist in the world today, and can look at the history all the way back from the beginning. This transparency solves a lot of the world's trust problem and a lot of the world's money problems today. It eliminates the possibility of a lot of shenanigans, a lot of fraud, a lot of the lies and the deceit and the confiscation and the stealing that has gone on throughout history. And so the base layer, you want to have this open nature to it. The privacy will come. The privacy will be added on additional layers on top of Bitcoin. So as an example, Litecoin, my God, not that shit coin. Lightning, which is a layer 2 protocol on top of Bitcoin, right, has more privacy than the base layer does. Is it 100% private? No, but you can gain a lot more privacy using Lightning than you can using the base layer. And this privacy will only strengthen and increase over time. I do believe that 100% privacy will ultimately be achieved over time in the Bitcoin network. It just won't be on the base layer, and we don't want it to be on the base layer. As I mentioned, this lack of transparency and privacy in a base layer of money has been the problem all along. Fiat currencies came into existence, which gave controlling entities, factions, leaders, lords, governments, and things of that nature, the power to rob the masses. It came because there's no transparency at the base layer. We were supposed to have $1 for every amount of gold, which was the base layer of money. $1 was to be printed, which had to be backed by $1 of gold. But you could actually print $2 for every $1 worth of gold, or $10 for every $1 worth of gold, or you could start printing 100 or thousands of dollars for every $1 worth of gold if no one knew how much gold there was at the base layer. And so all of this fractional reserve, all of this lying and deceit of how much really exists and how much you can really print on top of the base layer was possible because there's no transparency at the base layer. Bitcoin solves this. Bitcoin fixes it. And so you can't have privacy if you want all of these benefits. You can't have privacy at the base layer. But I do believe that it's coming. I do believe that privacy will be strengthened and increased in the Bitcoin ecosystem, but just not at the base layer. All right. And I say, to put it another way, what is the guarantee that BTC bought peer-to-peer is actually non-KYC? Well, there is no guarantee. So I do believe that there are some people who are acquiring what they assume to be non-KYC Bitcoin, and it's not totally non-KYC Bitcoin. And so it has become increasingly more difficult to actually get pure non-KYC Bitcoin. But the bottom line, generally speaking, is that you can assume that your Bitcoin is non-KYC if the source of that Bitcoin is not from a KYC financial organization. All right. Now, there are ways to supposedly coin join your Bitcoin to try to wipe its history from it and things of that nature. That's starting to become trickier today, and I think will increasingly become trickier. But there are ways to sort of disconnect the Bitcoin from its history, to clean it or wash it, to use inappropriate terms, but they're the best ones that come to mind at the moment. And as long as those practices remain legal in your jurisdiction, then by all means, you can try to go for that. But I am of the belief that most of you should not be, that this issue that we're talking about here should not be a pressing issue, largely because we are not in the stage of Bitcoin's evolution where your predominant thought should be how you're going to use Bitcoin. That Bitcoin today serves as the world's best savings mechanism, and it should be the resting place for anything that you have of excess. So if you make $100 and you only need $70, $30 goes to Bitcoin, and it stays there. That you should not be using Bitcoin as a stepping stone to something else in the relatively near future. That is using Bitcoin wrong, and that I believe that you're going to be shortchanging yourself by using it as this intermediate way to get something at this particular point. Bitcoin is the best savings technology the world has ever known. And I believe that it should be used as such, that in the future, once enough people have stored Bitcoin, have saved in Bitcoin, it naturally morphs into its own ecosystem whereby other people start demanding Bitcoin for the services that you need. And that's when it starts to become a medium of exchange, but it is not in the medium of exchange realm yet. Therefore, the majority of people should not be thinking about using Bitcoin in a medium of exchange. I get a lot of hate for this comment, but I understand the natural evolution of a sound money, and a sound money must spend an inordinate amount of time as a store of value before a true medium of exchange stage can come into being. And when you try to rush an item straight to medium of exchange, that you actually collapse it, that you ruin it, because there's not enough people that have it for it to actually be a real, true medium of exchange in the first place. In addition, another reason why you don't want medium of exchange now is because the stage in which an item experiences its greatest price appreciation is during medium of exchange. During the store of value stage. Starts to morph itself into the medium of exchange when enough people are already in. So if enough people are already in, the price appreciation slows down and the item becomes more stable, and then people start trading it back and forth with each other. We don't want that stabilization here yet. This thing still has life-changing capabilities to it, over and beyond the benefits that come from trade. So we're in the holding stage now. We're in the store stage of value, where we can still get thousands and thousands of X's in the price. We can get this thing with 200%, 300% gains on an annualized basis for an extended period of time. We don't want medium of exchange to squash that. We don't want that rate of price appreciation to prematurely be cut. And so this idea that we should go straight to medium of exchange, I think is incorrect. And I understand the reasons why. It's because Satoshi Nakamoto decided to label his white paper peer-to-peer cash. But I just believe he did that for marketing purposes because the group that he needed to appeal to were all about creating an alternative cash system. And so in order to get their attention, he had to label this thing cash. But even from the early days, it wasn't approached as Bitcoin was not approached as a cash as much as it was as a base layer of money. And the base layer of money is not cash. All right. And a lot of people don't understand this layered approach to money. And Nick Batia wrote a great book called Layered Money. I strongly recommend that you read it if you haven't. And it teaches you how money is a layered system. And we live our lives with money as a layered system as well. So, for instance, if you store your wealth in some big, giant, secret safe, all right, and you store the majority of your wealth there, that's the base layer of your wealth. You don't open you don't go to this secure location where the majority of your wealth is, open this giant, very powerful, secure safe, go in it to grab told money. You don't use your safe for told money. You don't pump your gas with base layer money. So you even operate your own life with layered money. You might have a 401k plan, which is part of the base layer of your wealth. You might have a safe where you stash a good portion of your wealth or what have you, but that is not what you use on a day-to-day basis. So you have your base layer of wealth. So you might have a 401k plan, which is the base layer of your wealth. You might have a savings account with some CDs or whatever. That's another higher layer, slightly more liquid than your 401k plan is. All right. You can get rid of a CD, take the penalty and get rid of a CD a lot easier than you can take the penalty and get rid of your 401k plan. All right. So that's a higher layer than the 401k. You might, on top of your CDs and the time locked money, you might have a savings account with no time lock on it. So you might have a few thousand, you might have $20,000 in savings. So you might have $100,000 in time lock CDs. You might have $1 million in your 401k plan. So your 401k plan has $1 million. You've got some CDs that are or some treasury note or some treasury bonds or whatever, some treasuries for a year or 2 years out, earning 5% interest or whatever, 3, 4, 5% interest. You might have $100,000 worth of that. That's a higher layer on top of the base layer of the 401k plan. You might have, I don't know, $20,000 in a savings account. That's a higher layer than your treasuries and your CDs. And you might have a checking account, which is a higher layer than your $20,000 in your savings account. And then you might have pocket change in your jeans, which is a higher layer than your checking account. Well, let's just say you might have debit cards or credit cards, which is a higher layer than your checking account. And then you might have some cash in your pocket, which is a higher layer than your credit cards. And so in your very own life, money is a layered system. And if we take this layered approach to Bitcoin as well, Bitcoin's base layer, all right, Bitcoin has a base layer and other layers are going to be fleshed out on top of Bitcoin. We're just early. You see, there might be as many as 7 layers on top of Bitcoin. We're still in the base layer stage of Bitcoin. That's how early we are. And we don't want to rush this layered system growing upward on top of base layer too fast either, because as I mentioned, the biggest price appreciation stage is in people coming in at the base layer. people coming in at the base layer. All the other layers are more for utilization, not storing, not hoarding, not hodling. It's the hodl stage that helps the price appreciation go to the moon. All right. So very important to understand that money is a layered system here. Let's see. Is there anything else I can answer here? I did want to keep this one relatively short, but it's always difficult for me to do here. Let's see. Bob is saying maintaining anonymity for a non-KYC Bitcoin stack poses a challenge due to the constant need for discretion. One minor mistake could link the Bitcoin to you, necessitating the use of an own node or Tor to conceal your IP address. Yeah. I do believe that becoming a true Bitcoiner does happen in stages. First, it is just getting some Bitcoin, usually through a centralized exchange. The second step, there are many steps. I'm not going to list them all, but the second step is self-custody in a single sig wallet. Then the next step might be moving to multi-sig. The next step might be running your own node and things of that nature. But I do think that ultimately we all want to reach the stage where we're running our own node and not relying on trust of anyone. We want to become our own bank. So running our own node is the ultimate way to do that. And yes, this will give us greater possibilities for privacy and things of that nature. All right, guys, I think that's it. I don't see many other questions regarding this topic here. As I mentioned, I just wanted to take this opportunity to give you my thoughts regarding this ongoing debate that I hear over and over and over again. I would suggest that you don't get tied up into this fight, that you really understand that both the types of Bitcoin serve a purpose. I think you should understand that there's a possibility that non-KYC Bitcoin does fetch a higher price. I do want you to understand that if you are building two types of Bitcoin, these two stashes, that you understand that they need to be labeled properly and you need to keep them exclusive from each other. I also want you to understand that in most cases, non-KYC Bitcoin is not illegal. This is not something that we're suggesting is illegal. It is not illegal to accumulate non-KYC Bitcoin. But there are some innovative ways that you can get non-KYC Bitcoin. There are some decentralized exchanges such as BISC and HODL. And there are many others that give you the ability to potentially grab some non-KYC Bitcoin. And there are also other innovative ways to get non-KYC Bitcoin. Start demanding Bitcoin from someone that wants something from you. You're taking someone to the airport as a favor and say, listen, I'll do this for you, but you gotta throw me a few dollars in Bitcoin. You're fixing someone's roof, demand that they pay you in Bitcoin. And they say, well, I don't know how to get it. And you show them how to get it. All right. Pay your friends' bills for them. Have them reimburse you in Bitcoin. Pay dinner bills with your friends. Have them pay you back in Bitcoin. There's some very innovative ways to accumulate, small bits of non-KYC Bitcoin. All right. I hope this talk was somewhat informative, and I certainly hope that it has jarred it's jarred some of you to consider this. So those of you who are not doing non-KYC Bitcoin in any possible way, hope it's incited you to understand the differences between the two, and maybe encourage that you should start to try to grab a little bit of non-KYC Bitcoin and vice versa. Listen, once again, guys, I thank you all for attending today, giving me as I mentioned, the commodity that you can never get back, which is your time. I appreciate that. I hope that I have delivered something here of value today. All right, guys, until next time, for all of those who are traders, as long as you're not trading Bitcoin, trade well. Continue to stack harder. We're not stacking hard enough. All right, and I'll speak to you next time.
My name is Oliver Velez, and I am your 13%er Bitcoiner. Be safe out there, and until next time. Boom!